After everything they did to my mom, I told my dad his family is dead to me. What I discovered broke my heart. Lies, betrayal, and years of secrets. My dad chose his family over us, and I finally spoke the truth no one else would say. This family will never be the same again. The rain pattered gently against the window, each droplet racing to the sill, only to be pushed aside by the next. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that made you want to curl up with a good book and forget about the outside world. But for me, there was no escape. The silence of the room was pierced by the vibration of my phone, lying on the coffee table. A message notification from Mom. Mom and I had always been close, our bond tightening over the years into something unbreakable. After a particularly nasty spat with Dad, she had retreated to her room, leaving me in the living room with nothing but my thoughts and the rhythmic sound of the rain. She didn't say much about it, but I knew it weighed on her, the way she'd sigh every time she saw her phone light up with another text from Uncle Larry. Invitations to family gatherings, subtle reminders of the tension that lingered like a bad smell in the air. I picked up the phone, reading her message. She was worried about me, worried about us. It was Uncle Larry's kid's birthday party tomorrow, and she knew what that meant. Another round of pretending to fit in, of smiling through gritted teeth, while the family that was supposed to support us tore us down. But this time, she had had enough. She had decided that we weren't going. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that we wouldn't have to endure their spiteful whispers and cold glares. Anger that we had to endure it at all. Mom had always been the glue holding us together, but she was tired. Tired of being the punching bag, the one who took the blows so the rest of us could pretend we had a normal family. And I was tired of watching her do it. The house was eerily still, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I knew Dad was home, but he was avoiding us. I couldn't blame him. He never knew how to handle these situations, always trying to smooth things over with a forced smile and a pat on the back. But not this time. This time, Mom had drawn a line in the sand, and she wasn't backing down. The next day, the tension was palpable. Mom was in the kitchen, packing lunches for me and my brother. She looked up as I entered, a sad smile playing on her lips. "They're not going to like this," she said softly, referring to our absence from the party. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Let 'em not like it. We're not going to let them treat us like that anymore." Her eyes searched mine, looking for reassurance. "Are you sure, honey?" "Yeah, Mom. I've got your back." The words felt strong leaving my mouth, but the knot in my stomach told a different story. What if Dad found out we weren't going? What if he was already there, telling Uncle Larry and Aunt Karen that we had a family emergency? Would he be mad at us for not going along with the charade? But as we sat down to eat, the phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Mom took a deep breath before answering. The conversation was short, but the silence that followed was deafening. She hung up and turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Your father knows we're not coming." The party came and went without us. I spent the evening scrolling through social media, watching the party unfold through the curated snapshots and videos. Everyone looked so happy, so normal. But the comments section told a different story. There were whispers about my mom, about her dramatic exit. The audacity of them, acting like she was the one who had ruined the family, not the ones who had pushed her to the edge. Mom was in her room, the door slightly ajar. I could hear her sobbing quietly, and it was all I could do not to march over there and demand she never go to another one of their functions again. But she had made her decision, and I had to respect it. Days turned into weeks, and the silence from Dad's side of the family was deafening. Mom tried to keep her chin up, but I could see the sadness in her eyes every time she thought no one was watching. She'd always been the peacemaker, the one to extend an olive branch. But not this time. This time, she was standing firm. One evening, as we were both winding down in the living room, she broke the silence. "You know, I never wanted it to come to this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked up from my book, setting it aside. "What do you mean?" "Your dad's family. I tried so hard to fit in, to be part of them, but they never accepted me." I reached over and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "They're the ones losing out, Mom. You're amazing." She managed a weak smile. "Thanks, sweetie, but it's just hard, you know?" "Yeah, I know." The conversation lingered in the air, unresolved, as we both stared into the flickering light of the TV. I knew she was feeling guilty about the whole situation, like she had somehow failed at being the perfect wife and daughter-in-law, but I couldn't let her carry that burden alone. The next day, I decided to take action. I called my dad, my heart racing with each unanswered ring. When he finally picked up, I took a deep breath. "Dad, we need to talk." He arrived home later that night, his expression a mix of anger and resignation. We sat in the kitchen, the same room where Mom had packed our lunches for the party we never attended. "What do you want to say?" he asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath. Mom's not a punching bag, and neither are we. You can't keep forcing us to go to these things, pretending everything's okay when we all know it's not. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. I just don't want to lose my family, he said. They're the ones who are losing us, Dad. They don't respect Mom, and they never will. We can't keep bending over backward for them. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the table. Then, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored Mom's. I know you're right, but it's just, he trailed off, unable to find the words. It's just hard, I finished for him. But sometimes you have to choose between your family and the people who actually act like it. The following weeks were tense. Dad avoided the topic, and Mom and I held on to each other a little tighter. We went on with our lives, creating our own little bubble of happiness. I could see the weight lifting off her shoulders, the light returning to her eyes. But then, one evening, the doorbell rang. It was Uncle Larry, standing awkwardly on our porch, holding a plate of cookies. Can we talk? He asked, his eyes darting between Mom and me. Mom looked at me, and I nodded. It was time to face the music. We sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Uncle Larry cleared his throat. Look, I know we've had our differences, but family is important, and I think we all need to move past this. Mom's eyes narrowed. Move past what, exactly? He shifted uncomfortably. The misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? You called me a gold digger in front of my own children, she exclaimed, her voice shaking with restrained anger. He held up his hands. I'm sorry, okay? We all said things we didn't mean. I leaned forward, my jaw clenched. But you meant it. And until you can look me and Mom in the eye and tell us you were wrong without any excuses, there's nothing to move past. The silence stretched on, until Uncle Larry finally sighed and handed over the plate. I guess I'll go, then. As the door closed behind him, Mom turned to me, a proud smile on her face. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For standing up for us. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the past and the hope of the future. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. We had drawn our line in the sand, and for the first time, someone from his family had acknowledged it. Days turned into weeks, and the phone calls from Dad's side of the family grew less frequent. Aunt Karen would occasionally reach out, trying to play peacemaker, but Mom remained firm. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going to back down. But then, one day, the phone rang, and it was Dad. He sounded different, tired, defeated. I need to see you both, he said. We need to talk. We sat around the kitchen table, the same one where we had shared countless meals, laughs, and tears. Dad looked at us, his eyes red and swollen. I've been thinking, he began, his voice cracking. I know I haven't been the best husband, or the best son. I've let my family walk all over us, and I'm sorry. Mom's hand tightened around her mug of tea, but she said nothing, letting him continue. I don't want to lose you, either of you, he went on. So, I've made a decision. I'm going to stand up to them, he said, his voice stronger now. I'm going to tell them that if they can't treat you with respect, then they can't be a part of our lives. I'll handle the family gatherings, the holidays. You don't have to go if you don't want to. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table to take his hand. Thank you, she murmured. I sat there, stunned. This was a side of Dad I hadn't seen in a long time. The man who had once fought for us against all odds. The man who had chosen Mom, and us, over everyone else. The following months were a whirlwind of change. Dad stood by his word, and slowly but surely, the family dynamics began to shift. There were still tense moments, awkward silences, and snide comments, but the storm had passed. We had our dad back, and he had chosen us. But the most surprising change came from within me. I had found my voice, my strength, in standing up for my mom. And in doing so, I had discovered a part of myself I didn't know existed. I wasn't just a daughter caught in the middle anymore. I was a woman capable of setting boundaries, of fighting for what was right. And as we sat there, the three of us, the rain outside seemed to whisper a quiet promise of a brighter tomorrow. We had faced the storm, and we had come out stronger on the other side. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There would still be moments of doubt, of frustration. But we had taken a stand, and it had brought us closer together. Mom's sadness began to fade, and Dad started to find his place in our little family again. And as for me, I knew that no matter what life threw our way, we would face it as a team. Because sometimes, the most important family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you build for yourself. Then one sunny afternoon, as I was helping Mom in the garden, the doorbell rang. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer it, returning a moment later with a look of shock on her face. It's your Aunt Laura, she whispered. "From your dad's side. She says she needs to talk to us." Aunt Laura was the sister Dad rarely talked about, the one who had moved across the country after a mysterious falling out with the rest of the family. She looked just like him, with the same stern jawline and piercing gaze, but there was something softer about her, a warmth that was missing from the rest of the relatives we knew. She stepped into our living room, her eyes scanning over us both before settling on the couch. "I know I should have called," she began, "but I felt like I needed to do this in person." As she spoke, she revealed a story we had never heard before. A story of love and loss, of a family torn apart by pride and misunderstandings. She talked of a will that had been hidden, a legacy that could have changed everything for Mom. And as she spoke, the pieces began to fall into place. The whispers of gold digging and drama taking on a new, sinister edge. It was a twist we never saw coming. A secret that had been buried for years, festering like a wound beneath the surface of our lives. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Dad looked at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded. Aunt Laura sighed. "Because I didn't know if you'd believe me, and because I thought it would only cause more pain." The room was silent as we digested the news. The ground beneath our feet felt unsteady, as if the very foundation of our family had shifted. And in that moment, we realized that the battle we had been fighting was not against each other, but against the shadows of the past. The days that followed were a blur of conversations and revelations, of old wounds being reopened and new ones being healed. Dad called his family, his voice firm as he told them what Aunt Laura had revealed. There was shouting, there were tears, but there was also a glimmer of hope that perhaps we could all move forward, together. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Aunt Laura became a regular presence in our lives, her laughter filling the house with a warmth that had been missing for so long. The family gatherings grew smaller, but they were no longer filled with the tension that had become a constant in our lives. It was just us, the three of us, and the occasional visit from Aunt Laura, building a new kind of family, one that was honest and loving. Looking back, I realized that sometimes it takes a stranger to show us what we've been too blind to see. Aunt Laura didn't just bring us a secret, she brought us a chance to heal, to redefine what it meant to be a family. And as we sat together, the four of us, sharing stories and laughter, I knew that no matter how hard the storm had been, it had brought us to a place we never would have reached without it. The rain outside had stopped, and the sun was shining, illuminating the path ahead of us. It was a new beginning, one built on the strength of our love for each other. The inheritance was more than just money. It was a legacy of resilience, of a woman who had been cast aside by her own family and had still managed to build a life of her own. Great Aunt Edna had been disowned for marrying against their wishes, and in her will, she had chosen us, her only surviving relatives, to receive everything she had worked so hard for. It was a silent rebuke to the family that had shunned her, and a declaration of her love for the woman who had been her sister-in-law. Mom held the paperwork in her trembling hands, her eyes scanning the pages as if searching for answers. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means that we're not alone," I said, placing my hand on hers. "It means that we have a choice." The choice was to face the past head-on, to confront the dark secrets that had been buried for generations. We decided to hold a family meeting, inviting everyone from Dad's side to our house. The tension was palpable as they filed in, eyeing Aunt Laura with suspicion, but she held her ground, her back straight, her eyes never leaving Dad's. As we revealed Great Aunt Edna's will and the reasons behind it, the room grew still. Uncle Larry shifted uncomfortably, while Aunt Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. They had never known the full story, and the realization of their complicity in the suffering of their own brother was a heavy pill to swallow. But there were others who had known, who had chosen to keep the secret hidden. And as the truth unfurled before them, their expressions shifted from anger to regret. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was one that needed to happen. We talked about the hurt that had been passed down through the years, the pain that had festered into resentment and bitterness. And as we talked, something strange began to happen. The walls that had separated us started to crumble, brick by brick, until we were all just people, flawed and imperfect, but bound by blood and a shared history. In the end, we decided to use the inheritance to start a foundation in Great Aunt Edna's name, to help others who had been ostracized by their families. It was a way to honor her memory and to show that love could overcome the darkest of shadows. And as we stood together, the four of us, I knew that we had found our way out of the storm. We were still a work in progress, but we were a family, united in our determination to be better, to do better. And that was all that mattered. But just as we thought we had turned the corner, a letter arrived in the mail, postmarked from a town we had never heard of. It was from a long-lost cousin, claiming that Great Aunt Edna had left her something in her will, something she hadn't mentioned to us. The letter was vague, but the implication was clear. There was more to the story, more that could potentially tear us apart. The revelation shook us to our core. We had just started to heal, to build our newfound family on the foundation of honesty and love. Now, here was someone claiming a piece of what we had worked so hard to claim as our own. The whispers of doubt and mistrust began to creep back in, and the family gatherings grew tense once again. We decided to invite this mysterious cousin, Rachel, to our next family meeting. She was young, barely older than me, with a guarded look in her eyes that spoke volumes. As she spoke, the story grew more and more complicated. Great-Aunt Edna had had another family, a secret life that none of us knew about. Rachel had been the product of a forbidden love, and she had the paperwork to prove it. The room was silent, the air thick with shock and anger. How could she have kept this from us? Why hadn't she told us about Rachel, about the love that had been stolen from her? But as Rachel shared her own tales of pain and rejection, something strange happened. The anger began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of understanding. We were all just pawns in a game played by the ghosts of the past. And so, we faced the storm once more, armed with the knowledge that family is messy, that love is complex, and that sometimes the truth hurts. But we faced it together, with open hearts and a willingness to listen. And in the end, we discovered that Great-Aunt Edna's legacy was not just the inheritance, but the strength to overcome the darkness and find our way back to each other. The family was torn apart again, as Rachel's existence brought to light Great-Aunt Edna's hidden past. The whispers grew louder, the accusations more vicious. But amidst the chaos, a strange bond began to form between Rachel and me. We were both outsiders, both seeking our place in a family that didn't quite know how to accept us. We spent hours talking, sharing our stories of feeling unwanted and unloved. Rachel spoke of her mother, who had raised her alone, always hinting at a grandaunt who had abandoned her. And I spoke of the pain of watching Mom suffer, a feeling like I had to be the glue that held us all together. As the days turned into weeks, Rachel and I grew closer, forming an alliance against the tide of anger and betrayal that had engulfed us. We dug through old family albums, piecing together the puzzle of Great-Aunt Edna's life. And what we found was a woman who had loved fiercely, who had made mistakes, and who had paid the ultimate price for her choices. The family was torn between accepting Rachel and holding on to their resentment. Dad was torn between his newfound resolve to stand up for us and the fear of losing his family once again. But Rachel and I were determined to show them that love could be bigger than the secrets that had been kept. The family meeting was fraught with tension, the air thick with unspoken accusations and recrimination. Rachel presented her case calmly, her eyes never leaving Dad's. "I'm not here to take anything away from you," she said. "I just want to know the truth. And maybe, just maybe, we can all find a way to heal." As the room erupted into arguing and finger-pointing, Mom stood up, her voice clear and steady. "We've all been hurt by the past," she said, "but we can't let it define us anymore." She turned to Rachel, her eyes filled with compassion. "You're part of us now. We may not have known about you, but we're family. And family sticks together." One by one, the others nodded in agreement, until even Uncle Larry looked at Rachel with something approaching kindness. The letters from Great-Aunt Edna were like a treasure trove of secrets and pain. Each page revealed more of the woman we had never truly known, and with each revelation, the walls between us began to crumble. Rachel and I pored over them, her eyes wide with wonder as she discovered the mother she had never known. The letters spoke of a love so deep it had to be hidden, a love that had been her downfall. Edna had been forced to choose between her family and the woman she loved, and she had chosen love, knowing it would cost her everything. The words were filled with regret and longing, but also with a fierce determination to protect her daughter, to give her a life free from the bigotry and judgment that had plagued her own. As we read, we began to understand the weight of the secret she had carried, the price she had paid for her happiness. Rachel's mother had been the love of her life, and she had given up her place in the family to be with her. It was a sacrifice we couldn't even begin to fathom. But as we sat there, the ink on the pages seemed to pulse with the life she had lived, the love she had felt. The letters didn't just tell Rachel's story, they told ours too. They showed us that the family we had always known was a facade, a construct built on fear and prejudice. They showed us that love didn't have to conform to their narrow-minded ideals. And as Rachel took my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears, I knew that we had found a new family, one that was bound not by blood but by the strength of our hearts.